That message moved more money than the GDP of the United States. Not a hack, not a weapon. 5 words in a chat window, typed on a Tuesday afternoon in 2006. The sender, Tom Hayes, a 28-year-old derivatives trader at UBS Tokyo who generated $300 million in profits for his employers. The recipient, the man who submitted Barclays' daily LIBOR rate, the number that sat underneath $350 trillion in global financial contracts. $350 trillion. 4 times the annual GDP of every country on Earth, combined. Priced on one survey question. Answered daily by the banks that profited most from moving it. 1 basis point, 0.01%. On a $1 billion interest rate swap, that decimal is worth $100,000 per day. Hayes wasn't managing a $1 billion book, and he wasn't the only one doing this. 16 of the world's biggest banks sat on the LIBOR panel. Every morning at 11 a.m. London time, they answered one question. At what rate could you borrow funds? Just prior to 11 a.m. Could. Not did. Not transacted at. An opinion. And from 2005 to 2012, at least 7 banks coordinated their opinions, daily, in writing, on recorded channels, without any apparent concern for who was watching, because nobody was watching. The media told you this was a rogue trader scandal. If you look through the strategy lens, the rogue trader was the bank's top performer for 5 years, reviewed, rewarded, and promoted, right up until the moment the institution needed someone to hand to a prosecutor. Tom Hayes would eventually be convicted, sentenced to 14 years, paraded as the lone wolf who broke global finance. In 2025, the UK Supreme Court quashed his conviction. His £400 million lawsuit against UBS is still active. Not a single bank executive has faced criminal charges. This is the trillion-dollar pattern. Before the cartel, there was an idea. 1969. A Greek banker named Minos Zombonakis needs to price an $80 million loan for the Shah of Iran. He can't use a fixed rate. Funding costs change too fast. So he invents something. Ask the banks what it costs them to borrow, average the answers, use that as the rate. Simple, dynamic, honest. By 1986, the British Bankers Association formalizes it. They call it LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate. They publish it through Reuters. Every trading terminal on Earth starts using it. Within 20 years, LIBOR becomes the connective tissue of global finance. It prices the monthly payment on a mortgage in Cleveland. It prices a $500 million swap between Deutsche Bank and a Japanese pension fund. It prices student loans, corporate acquisitions, government borrowing. $350 trillion in contracts, the world's most important number. The Financial Times calls it the key cog in the global financial machine. Business schools teach it as a model of elegant self-regulation. The BBA was not a regulator. The British Bankers Association, the body administering the world's most important benchmark, was a trade lobbying group. Funded by the banks it was supposed to oversee. No enforcement authority, no audit power, no ability to verify a single submission against a single real transaction. It could only ask the question, and here is the flaw that nobody fixed for 22 years. The question asked what rate a bank could borrow at, not did, not transacted at, could. LIBOR was an opinion poll anchoring $350 trillion in contracts. By the mid-2000s, the market LIBOR was designed to measure had begun to disappear. Banks were funding themselves through secured repo markets. The physical market beneath the benchmark was evaporating. LIBOR was a speedometer, but the engine it was measuring had quietly been removed. Which means that when Tom Hayes typed, "keep it at 539, he wasn't manipulating a market. He was filling in a blank space the market had already vacated. And when something has no observable foundation, the person holding the pen writes whatever they need." RBS Senior Trader, Singapore, Bloomberg Chat, August 2007. It's a cartel now in London. Dangerous question number 1. If the benchmark had no real market beneath it, and the submissions were unverified opinions answered by the same banks that profited from moving them, what was the number that actually priced $350 trillion in contracts for 7 years? Answer coming in 10 minutes. Stay with us. In April 2008, 2 reporters did something no regulator had bothered to do in 22 years of LIBOR's existence. They looked at 2 numbers at the same time. Number 1, what the banks were submitting as their LIBOR rates. Number 2, what the credit default swap market was pricing as those same banks' actual credit risk. A credit default swap is insurance. You pay a premium. If the bank defaults, you collect. It is priced by institutional investors placing real money on real probability bets. When Molenkamp and Whitehouse plotted both data series together, they saw something that should have been impossible. The CDS market was screaming that these banks were in distress. LIBOR was showing nothing. Same institutions. Two completely different risk pictures, simultaneously. The gap between those two lines is the fingerprint of the manipulation. Now here is the hidden math that explains how the cartel actually manufactured that gap. The BBA's trimming mechanism was designed to prevent any single bank from moving the rate. It threw out the top 25% of submissions and the bottom 25%, then averaged the middle, which means a single bank manipulating achieves nothing. Its submission gets trimmed. But three banks submitting in coordinated alignment? The median shifts. The published rate moves. Every derivatives book positioned for that move becomes instantly profitable. The trimming mechanism designed to prevent manipulation actually required coordination to beat it. The cartel wasn't a workaround for the architecture. It was the only way to use it. Now apply the math. A trader managing a $50 billion book of interest rate swaps has a DVSO1 dollar value of 1 basis point of approximately $5 million. That is the daily gain or loss for a 0.01% move in LIBOR, 1 basis point, coordinated across 3 banks, risk-free, $5 million profit per basis point per day on a $50 billion book. Hayes wasn't managing a $50 billion book. He was managing more. UBS settlement documents alone show 2,000 documented manipulation requests over 5 years. 2,000. That is not a rogue trader. That is a workflow. Phase 1. The profit motive. 2005-2007. He builds a network, not through encrypted channels, through Bloomberg chat, Reuters messages, the normal recorded infrastructure every trading desk used. Phase 2. The survival motive. 2007-2009. When the crisis hit, the manipulation changed character. It stopped being about profit. It became about survival. In the frozen interbank market of 2008, submitting an honest high LIBOR rate was functionally equivalent to lighting a flare that said, "We might be the next Lehman." Barclays Treasury Manager. Internal instruction, 2008. Stick within the bounds, so no head above the parapet. This was not a trader chasing a bonus. This was senior treasury management directing submitters to file false data, to a benchmark that tens of millions of contracts trusted, to prevent market panic. $6 billion. Estimated underpayment to U.S. municipal governments from suppressed LIBOR swap receipts. Money meant for schools, roads, and public services. A school building, paint fading, budget cuts visible. Then, a trading floor in 2009, year-end, bonuses distributed, champagne. Dangerous question number 2. If senior treasury management was directing the lowballing, and the Bank of England may have implicitly encouraged it, when exactly did this stop being a rogue trader story? And who built the narrative that said it was? Answer coming in 10 minutes. Stay with us. Here is the most important thing to understand about the LIBOR cartel. It didn't require greed. It required rationality. Specifically, it required understanding one concept from game theory. One concept that every MBA student studies but almost nobody applies to real systems. The prisoner's dilemma. Here is the LIBOR version. You are head of rate submissions at a major panel bank. September 2008. You fill in your bank's daily estimate. 2 choices. Choice A. Submit honestly. By noon, press coverage. By 2 p.m., stock falls 8%. Choice B. Submit low. You survive. You get your bonus. The system moves on. The Nash equilibrium, the stable outcome that rational actors always converge on, is universal lowballing. Not because bankers are uniquely evil, because the architecture made individual honesty collectively suicidal. The same game theory logic applied in Phase 1. Before 2012, no regulatory framework existed. Expected gain, millions in daily P&L. Expected punishment, near zero. The broker network. The cartel's invisible spine. Hayes didn't need to contact 16 banks. He needed one broker. Every morning, interdealer broker firms sent out a run-through. One message to one broker. The broker edits the morning run-through. 16 submitters read it. 16 submissions shift. The published rate moves. Hayes's book profits. Wash trades. How the cartel paid its middlemen. The bribe was invisible on paper. A trader executes a buy order on an asset, $500 million of treasury bills. Simultaneously, an equal and opposite sell order. The trades cancel. Net position, 0. But the broker collects a commission on both legs. At institutional volumes, $50,000 to $100,000 per wash trade pair. On paper, a legitimate brokerage commission. In reality, payment for services rendered to the cartel. The CFTC settlement for UBS explicitly details this mechanism. Dangerous question. But 3. If 2,000 documented manipulation requests generated visible, anomalous P&L patterns across 5 years, and senior managers reviewed those books daily, what exactly were they reviewing? Answer coming in 10 minutes. Stay with us. Memos, whistleblowers, and the architecture of the perfect scapegoat. June 27, 2012. Barclays settles. $453 million. Documents go public. And for the first time, the institutional record of the cartel is visible in full. Barclays, UBS, RBS, Deutsche Bank, Rabobank, EU cartel, $9 billion in fines. Paid from shareholder funds. Not from the executives who supervised the desks, reviewed the P&L, or signed off on the compensation structures. Can a trading desk execute 2,000 manipulation requests over 5 years, generating visible patterns, without those patterns appearing in reports reviewed by senior management? In any functioning organization? No. The Bank of England, the most carefully managed chapter. In 2008, a recording surfaced, a conversation between a senior Barclays employee and a Bank of England official. The official appeared to suggest that Barclays' submissions were too high relative to peers. Barclays traders later cited this as implicit central bank authorization to lowball. No central banker was investigated. Tom Hayes, the architecture of the perfect scapegoat. Tom Hayes was convicted in August 2015. 8 counts, 14 years. Reduced to 11, released 2021. His defense throughout, his activities were not only known by senior management, they were explicitly directed by senior management. That moving LIBOR was not rogue behavior. It was the job. UBS and Citigroup both received regulatory leniency, in some cases immunity, in exchange for cooperating with investigators. Evidence that included, in substantial part, communications involving Tom Hayes. Tom Hayes. 14-year sentence. Conviction quashed. 2025. Every CEO and head of rates who supervised the desks. 0 criminal convictions. Hayes is now suing UBS for £400 million, claiming he was deliberately positioned as the scapegoat to shield senior executives. The manipulation evidence was never challenged, only the framing. Dangerous. Question number 4. The institutions that ran this cartel now sit on the advisory committees building the successor benchmark infrastructure. What is the structural guarantee that the same incentive architecture won't reproduce itself? Answer coming in 10 minutes. Stay with us. This is where most financial documentaries lose you. The jargon, the abstraction, the sense that this happened somewhere else, to someone else. So let's make it specific. If you had an adjustable rate mortgage in the United States between 2005 and 2011, the cartel set your monthly payment, not the market, the cartel, without your knowledge, without your consent, without any mechanism available to you to detect it. Your city's budget, municipalities across the United States, had entered into interest rate swaps with the cartel banks. The deal, the city pays a fixed rate, the bank pays a floating rate pegged to LIBOR. With LIBOR artificially suppressed during the crisis, the floating payments flowing back to cities were smaller than they should have been, every single day, for years. Your pension funds, the retirement savings of firefighters, nurses, teachers, held hundreds of billions in LIBOR-linked instruments. The systematic mispricing transferred value from people who had spent careers in public service into the P&L of trading desks that were already the most profitable businesses on earth. The post-LIBOR world, the new risk nobody is talking about, so far replaced LIBOR, transaction-based, over $1 trillion in daily observable trades, no survey, no opinion, no could. The last USD LIBOR fixing, June 30th, 2023. Today, LIBOR is gone, but so far has a structural vulnerability the industry is still processing. LIBOR was unsecured. It baked in bank credit risk. SOFR is anchored to treasuries. When crisis hits, yields fall. Even as bank funding costs spike, margin compressed, balance sheet stress. The cartel ended. The architecture that made it possible did not. The institutions that ran the cartel now sit on the advisory committees that govern the new system, not through conspiracy, because they are the only entities with sufficient scale. Tom Hayes typed, "Keep it at 539. He is the man who went to prison. The system that created him is still operational. The decimal point has changed. The architecture has not." Dangerous question number 5. LIBOR ran on self-reported, unverified data. Right now, today, which other markets are running on the same architecture? And who has the scale and incentive to be doing what Hayes did? Answer coming in 10 minutes. Stay with us. We don't have the answer, but you now have the lens. In 2006, the man at the desk next to you was adjusting the most important number in global finance. Your mortgage lender didn't know. Your pension manager didn't know. Your city's finance officer didn't know. Your regulator didn't know. The 2 reporters who broke it open? They were reading the same public data that every regulator, every central bank, and every watchdog body had access to for 22 years. They just knew what 2 columns to put next to each other. That is the entire value of financial literacy. Not that it makes you smarter than the institutions, it makes you harder to keep in the dark. Most people who watch this will feel informed. They'll think about it for a day, then the next video starts, and this fades. The LIBOR cartel ran for 7 years, while regulators watched, while central banks knew, until the settlement documents became public, by which point the cartel had extracted its profits and begun its retirement. Most people watch this and move on. The ones who subscribe have decided that understanding how this system actually works is worth more than the 2 minutes it takes to click a button. Subscribe. Not as a favor, as a decision. The next layer is already being built. Pinned comment. Drop your verdict. Tom Hayes was convicted, served time, and had his conviction quashed by the UK Supreme Court in 2025. Not because the manipulation didn't happen, but because of a legal misdirection in the original trial. He is now suing UBS for £400 million, claiming he was used as a deliberate scapegoat while the executives who directed his trading desk retired without charge. Verdict. Was Hayes a criminal who is now rewriting history, or an institutionally directed employee who was handed to regulators the moment the bank needed a body? And if you work in finance, law, compliance, or any industry where informal workarounds exist that everyone above you knows about but nobody documents, tell us what you saw. No names, just the architecture. We read every comment. We're building a database of how systems actually work.